Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went there? Or reached for a name, someone you know well, and found nothing but silence where it used to be? Most people over 50 brush these moments off. They call it aging. They accept it. They assume it is simply what happens. But what if I told you that those small moments of forgetting are not inevitable? What if the science now shows us that the brain, even in your 60s, 70s, and beyond, has the ability to grow, strengthen, and protect itself? And what if the most powerful tool for doing that costs nothing, requires no prescription, and can be started today? That is not a promise. That is what peer-reviewed neuroscience research now confirms. Today I want to walk you through exactly what happens inside your brain when you move your body, and why the research is clear that people in their 50s and 60s who act on this information are measurably protecting themselves from one of the most feared conditions of aging. This is not about becoming an athlete. This is about understanding what your brain needs to stay sharp and giving it exactly that. Every video on this channel gives you what science actually says about your health. Subscribe so you never miss one. Before we talk about solutions, let us talk about what is actually happening when memory begins to fade. Memory is not a single system. It is a collection of processes involving several different brain regions. But when it comes to the kind of memory that affects daily life, remembering where you put your keys, recalling a conversation from yesterday, or learning a new skill, one structure is absolutely central. It is called the hippocampus. The hippocampus sits deep inside the brain, one on each side, and it is responsible for taking the experiences of your day and converting them into long-term memories. Think of it as your brain's filing system. Every meaningful event, every new piece of information, every face and name you are trying to hold on to, it all passes through the hippocampus first. Here's what research tells us about aging. Starting in our 50s, the hippocampus naturally begins to lose volume, about 1 to 2% per year in some people. That gradual shrinkage is one of the primary reasons why memory retrieval starts to feel slower, why names slip, why it takes longer to process new information. It is not laziness, it is not weakness, it is biology. But, and this is the critical part, that shrinkage is not fixed. It is not a one-way road. Studies suggest this process can be significantly slowed and in some cases partially reversed. The mechanism that makes that possible is something most people have never heard of, and it is triggered every single time you move your body. There is a protein in your brain called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You will not hear this word in most doctors' offices, not because it is unimportant, but because it is one of the most important discoveries in modern neuroscience, and most of us simply have not caught up with the science yet. BDNF acts like a fertilizer for your brain. When levels of BDNF are high, the hippocampus is better able to grow new connections, strengthen existing ones, and, remarkably, generate brand new neurons. Yes, new brain cells, in adults, even in their 70s and 80s. For decades, scientists believed the adult brain could not produce new neurons. That idea has now been overturned. Research using advanced imaging and tissue analysis has confirmed that neurogenesis, the birth of new brain cells, continues into the 9th decade of human life in the hippocampus. The question is simply whether the conditions in your brain are supporting that process or suppressing it. BDNF is what determines that. And here is what triggers BDNF release in measurable amounts. Exercise, specifically aerobic exercise, any activity that elevates your heart rate for a sustained period. When your muscles contract during movement, they release a protein called irisin. That protein crosses the blood-brain barrier and stimulates BDNF production. Simultaneously, your liver responds to the physical exertion by releasing a ketone called beta-hydroxybutyrate, which also crosses into the brain and further amplifies BDNF levels. In simple terms, when you move your body, your muscles and your liver send chemical signals directly to your brain, telling it to grow. Every single time, without exception. Here's something that surprises most people when they first hear it. You do not have to exercise for months to feel a difference in your brain. The effects begin the same day. Research examining the immediate cognitive effects of a single aerobic session, typically 30 to 45 minutes, found 3 consistent outcomes that were reproduced across multiple labs and multiple age groups. First, mood improved measurably, with reductions in anxiety, depression scores, and even hostility levels. Second, prefrontal cortex function improved, meaning that attention sharpened, reaction times sped up, and the ability to shift focus between tasks became more efficient. Third, and this is especially relevant for anyone over 50, the improvements were actually more pronounced in older participants than in younger ones. One study examining subjects ranging in age from their 20s all the way to their 90s found that older participants showed the greatest cognitive gains from a single exercise session. The brain at 60 is not less responsive to exercise. In some ways, it is more responsive. It is hungrier for what movement provides. What this means practically is that the morning you choose to go for a brisk walk or take a swim, your brain is sharper for hours afterward. Studies suggest these acute effects last up to 2 hours post-exercise, so timing matters. Exercising before mentally demanding activities, a difficult conversation, important paperwork, learning something new, places your brain in its best possible state for the task ahead. If you want to understand the long-term stakes clearly, there is one study you need to know about. Researchers in Sweden tracked 300 women beginning in the 1960s, when these women were in their 40s. At the start of the study, each woman was classified as either low fitness, medium fitness, or high fitness based on their cardiovascular capacity. Then the researchers stepped back. They let these women live their lives. No interventions, no instructions. 40 years later, they returned. These women were now in their 80s, and the question was simple. What happened to their cognitive health as a function of how fit they were in their 40s? The results were striking. Women who had been classified as high fitness in their 40s retained sharp cognitive function significantly longer than their low fitness counterparts. The difference was not minor. The high fitness group gained an average of 9 additional years of healthy cognitive function compared to the low fitness group. 9 years. That is not a rounding error. That is nearly a decade of clear memory, independent thinking, and mental sharpness, or the absence of it. This study did not prove that exercise prevents Alzheimer's disease or dementia outright, but it does suggest powerfully that building and maintaining cardiovascular fitness throughout your middle years is one of the most significant things you can do to protect your brain as you age. The women who moved more in their 40s were still benefiting 40 years later. Now the most important question for most people watching this. How much exercise is actually needed to get these brain benefits? Especially for someone who has not been particularly active for years. The answer from the research is genuinely encouraging. A clinical study specifically designed to answer this question enrolled adults aged 30 to 55 who were classified as low fit, meaning they were exercising less than 30 minutes per week. These participants started a program of 2 to 3 cardio sessions per week. each session lasting approximately 45 minutes, including warm-up and cool-down. The real exercise duration was closer to 35 minutes. After just 3 months, the results were measurable. Memory performance on hippocampal-dependent tasks improved significantly. These were spatial memory tasks, recognition tasks, and attention tests, exactly the cognitive functions that tend to decline with age. Mood improved. Motivation to continue exercising increased. And crucially, these were previously sedentary people. They were not athletes. They were people in their 40s and 50s starting from close to zero. 2 to 3 sessions per week, 35 minutes of real effort each time. That is the threshold. That is the minimum that the science supports for meaningful, measurable brain benefit. And for those who can do more, the data also supports that. A follow-up study with moderately active adults found a clear dose-response relationship. The more sessions per week, the better the hippocampal memory outcomes and the better the baseline mood. Every additional workout added benefit. But the baseline, the floor at which real cognitive improvement begins, is 2 to 3 sessions per week. One of the most common questions I hear is whether the specific type of exercise matters. Running versus walking, cycling versus swimming, high intensity versus moderate pace. Here is what the research actually says. What matters most is cardiovascular elevation, getting your heart rate meaningfully above its resting level for a sustained period. The specific activity is secondary. Walking briskly counts. A swim counts. A low-impact aerobics class counts. Cycling counts. What does not count, at least for these specific brain benefits, is sitting on a chair doing light stretching or strolling at a pace that barely elevates your breathing. The threshold that appears in most studies is a moderate to vigorous cardiovascular effort, meaning you can speak, but holding a full conversation takes noticeable effort. That level of exertion is what drives the muscle protein release, the BDNF cascade, and the hippocampal benefits we have been discussing. For people over 50 who have joint concerns or physical limitations, low-impact options are equally valid. Water aerobics, stationary cycling, elliptical training, or even sustained brisk walking on flat ground can all reach and maintain the heart rate range that triggers these brain benefits. The exercise does not have to be painful. It does not have to be exhausting. It simply has to be consistent. Exercise is the foundation, but research points to 2 other daily habits that work alongside it to protect brain function as we age. The first is sleep. During deep sleep, the brain consolidates the memories formed during the day, transferring information from short-term to long-term storage, clearing metabolic waste products, and restoring the neural circuits that govern attention and decision-making. Poor sleep does not just make you feel foggy the next morning. Over time, chronic sleep disruption accelerates the very hippocampal changes we are trying to prevent. 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep is not a luxury for the aging brain. It is a biological requirement. The second is focused mental practice, what research increasingly refers to as meditation or intentional present moment awareness. Studies show that even 10 to 12 minutes of daily guided body scan meditation, practiced consistently over 8 weeks, produces measurable reductions in stress reactivity, improvements in sustained attention, and better emotional regulation. For older adults especially, the ability to stay mentally present rather than locked in anxious future thinking or rumination over the past is deeply connected to overall cognitive health. Exercise, sleep, focused mental practice. These 3 pillars together form what neuroscience increasingly recognizes as the most evidence-supported foundation for protecting cognitive function across the lifespan, and each one reinforces the others. Let me bring this together into something you can actually use starting tomorrow. The brain you have at 50, 60, or 70 is not finished. It is not fixed. Every single morning that you choose to move your body, even for 30 minutes, even at a pace that simply elevates your heart rate, you are triggering a biological process that tells your hippocampus to grow, to strengthen, and to protect itself. The Swedish women who exercised in their 40s were still benefiting 40 years later. The sedentary adults in their 50s who started 2 sessions a week saw measurable memory improvements in just 3 months. You do not need to become an athlete. You do not need a gym membership or an expensive program. You need consistency. 2 to 3 sessions per week. 30 to 45 minutes of movement that gets your heart rate up. Done every week, that habit builds what researchers describe as a larger, stronger, more resilient hippocampus, and it does so at any age. If there is one thing I want you to take from this video, it is this. The most powerful thing you can do for your brain today does not come in a bottle or a prescription. It comes from movement. It always has. Always speak with your doctor before beginning a new exercise program, especially if you have existing cardiovascular or joint conditions. This video is for educational purposes only and does not replace professional medical advice. If your doctor doesn't have time to explain this, I will. Subscribe. A new video is coming soon.